Hello and welcome to another episode of Attacking Third, a CBS Sports soccer podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports, joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, NWSL analyst and broadcaster. On today's episode, we are still cranking out NWSL 2022 team-by-team previews during this NWSL preseason. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into Angel City FC. But first, a quick reminder to follow us on Twitter for all breaking news at Attacking Third. If you're listening to this as a podcast, please give us a 5-star rating and review. It just takes a second and it really helps us out. You can do that on Apple Podcasts on the 5-star rating review page, or on Spotify right on the Attacking Third page. Go ahead and give us a 5 stars and give us a hand. Lisa, we're finally going to talk about an expansion team.
We're doing expansion teams. Heck yeah. This is hard. I mean, writing this rundown was difficult.
Yeah.
Talking off mic, it was like, okay, we don't know what to expect. We have nothing to go on just based on these players' experiences at other clubs, in college, in other leagues. Luckily, Angel City, we know their head coach pretty well from her tenure in the NWSL. We'll dive into all of that, but it's really difficult to kind of predict what's going to happen for an expansion club. But we got some tricks up our sleeve for what we're predicting for Angel City FC. How are you today, Sandra?
I'm doing good. I know we were excited to finally get into the expansion clubs because we were like, they might be a little bit different. There might be a little bit of a different, kind of tempo that we're having on this podcast, just because it is an expansion side. It's not as if we've got a 2021 regular season to sort of walk through with the expansion club. So for Angel City, I'm excited to dive right in. Let's do a little bit of a team overview as best we can. We're going to go through their off season because that's what we've got to go through in front of us. Angel City really been involved in the mix since, quite frankly, their introduction to the league. They went ahead and announced a big wave of investor group to sort of bring women's professional soccer back to the state of California. Went through a little bit of a rebrand. They got presented as Angel City and investor group. Then they stood with Angel City FC as the name. Then there's been the launch of the crest, the colors, the jerseys, everything, right? And in the midst of the 2021 NWSL season, which was a lot of preparations starting to take place ahead of their arrival in 2022, the team announced that they were going to have a new head coach and that was going to be Freya Coombe. She was announced in August of 2021, was formerly with Gotham FC, was a big part of trying to have a hand in the turnaround of that franchise and sort of get them on a new and better direction, right, for the years to come. And now she's going to have a new challenge, kind of maybe doing some things similarly, right, with Angel City. We're talking in terms of this big mountain of a franchise, Lisa. There's over 50 investors and co-owners amongst this star-studded lineup for them. Just some of these names that are jumping off. I mean, we can even go with the initial founders, right? With Natalie Portman, Nevi Wambach, Julie Erman, who's really been in the front of everything for this franchise since they've been introduced. But even recently, right, with some new additions for this ownership group.
There are a lot of females popping off this list. There are some males in this list as well. But the fact that they have so many investors and so many owners, some of them even children, a couple toddlers on this list. Most recently, Christina Aguilera, Gabrielle Union, and her daughter, Sean Johnson, Olympic gold medalist and gymnast, Sean Johnson East, Rachel Zoe, the fashionista. Just so many different people wanting to get involved in women's football in LA. And everyone knew for the last several years that if a women's team was started in LA, it would cause a lot of chatter. And that's exactly what Angel City has done and continues to do with the investors that they're getting, with the owners that they're acquiring, with the money and the statements that they are making off the pitch, giving a portion of ticket sales directly to the players. There's just so many different headlines and storylines circulating around this club that frankly doesn't even involve what's happening on the pitch. And maybe that's kind of the goal of Angel City, to be so much more than just an NWSL club, to be a brand, to be a marketing tool, to be a statement in the community in Los Angeles. There's just a lot of different layers to this club that it's easy to look at and look at all of these crazy names, Julie Foudy, Abby Wambach, like you mentioned, Lindsey Vonn, Candace Parker, that are involved in the investment and the ownership side of this club. But I want to focus on like the soccer on the pitch, because as much as having Abby Wambach and Julie Foudy involved in the ownership, they're not playing. They're also not coaching these players on the pitch. So let's stick with the soccer. I don't really know. I mean, it's fun to look at this and it's fun to see the goals and the plan that Angel City has, but they still got to perform and create results on the field.
We did a way too early power rankings episode back in December, really at the height of the offseason getting kicked off for NWSL. And we were a little ambitious with it. We put them at 7th, in December before the expansion drafts even took place, before we even had an inkling of who they were going to try to select, right? The moves that they were going to try to make, and in terms of our previews, what we've been doing in this series is we've been, giving segments where we talk a little bit about, the biggest, breakout roster sizes. We talk about the most detrimental loss or biggest loss for a club. But, considering Angel City is an expansion side, they technically haven't lost anyone yet. We're going to maybe take this time to highlight their first ever roster for the 2022 season. As follow, let's start with the goalkeepers, right? They have Didi Herrera, Sydney Casalia, Brittany Eisenhower, Maya Perez. For defenders, they've got Vanessa Gills. They've got Sarah Gorden, Paige Nielsen, Ellie Riley, Allison Swaby. For midfielders, Hope Breslin, Katie Cousins, Stephanie Ferrer Van Ginkel, Savannah McCaskill, Lily Nabet, Kari Recaro, Mary Taylor, Danny Weatherholt. And for the forward line, they've got Simone Charley, Clara Esme, June Endo, Tyler Lucy, Katie McClure, Christen Press, and Jasmine Spencer. Let's maybe take a look or chat a little bit about this roster and how it came to life, right, Lisa? There was a very active transfer window that took place in light of a double expansion draft that was happening, and Angel City was absolutely active. They were 100% taking the phone calls left and right. We saw a ton of movement happening during this transfer window, and then even with the expansion draft, taking the time to go ahead and select from the clubs that were still participating in that expansion draft. So I guess when we're looking at maybe this preseason roster just in front of us, who's maybe a couple players that stood out to you that they acquired over the course of the offseason, whether it was via trades negotiations or during expansion draft or NWSL draft?
This is a big list of players, a lot of different skill levels coming from a lot of different backgrounds. But I think it's important to note what kind of started this whole process for Angel City, and that's acquiring the rights of forward Christen Press from Racing Louisville, who had her rights from Racing Louisville's expansion draft back in 2021. She never went to Louisville, Kentucky, never put on a flower jersey in lavender. However, Angel City was their first signing, and it was kind of like the face of Angel City way back when was going to be Christen Press, forward for the U.S. women's national team, who is from Southern California, had always dreamed of playing in her home city of LA and playing for her club team there, something she has never been able to do. So that's what kind of started all of this player development for Angel City. And I think that's really important to kind of look and touch on. Then I think the next, that was just what started it all, and not necessarily a surprise to have Christen Press go home to LA. However, biggest signing for me after that initial wave of Christen Press being signed was the trades made between Chicago Red Stars and Angel City FC for defender Sarah Gorden and midfielder Julie Ertz. I think that having these players being traded, of course, Julie Ertz not listed on this roster for Angel City FC, but Sarah Gorden is. She was Iron Woman for Chicago Red Stars in 2021, played every single minute on the field in a center back role for Chicago throughout the regular season, leading Chicago to an NWSL championship match against the Washington Spirit. Sarah Gorden, a player that has come a really long way since starting in this professional league in the NWSL and solidified herself as a game changer in the back line for clubs. She can run down defenders. She's so speedy. So, like, we talk a lot about defenders and how they can play with the ball, but Sarah Gorden plays her best without the ball, as a defender should. She is so good with 1v1 defending. She doesn't get beat over the top by long balls because she can chase down forwards and tackle them from behind. She's a really smart soccer player that doesn't just rely on her athleticism and her speed to win the ball, but she relies on her smarts and her soccer defending abilities to play really good 1v1 defense against opponents. So this is a huge signing for Angel City, one that really stands out to me. Now, Sandra, for you, when you look at this, I mean, there are so many big names. I mean, even Simone Charley stands out to me, Kari Recaro from North Carolina. But for you, I'm not going to list all of the roster because it all is surprising for me. But for you, is there any particular player that stands out that you think is going to be a really good fit looking at the rest of the roster?
I really like what Angel City has done to try to flesh out their roster with a combination of smart deals that were made right during that transfer window, gauging interests from other teams, by extension the players who were perhaps eager or interested in making a change in their career. Something that stands out to me across this roster, alongside maybe some of the international signings, is that there is a level of NWSL experience that is coming into play with this team. And while maybe that could echo true for expansion teams in the past, we're just in a little bit of a different era now when it comes to NWSL and players and their experiences that they've had in the league for any future expansion teams joining the fold. We're talking about a league that's entering the 10th year of its existence, right? And looking, yes, at a player like Christen Press, who absolutely was that key first player signing to kick things off, but even going through their expansion draft, right? Selecting a player in Danny Weatherholt for their midfielders, and going on and selecting somebody like a Jasmine Spencer for the forward core, I think is going to come into play down the stretch, right? When we're looking at a regular season for NWSL and how much we talk about how long of a grind it can be, right? How quickly it is to have a really hot start, but then fizzle out down the stretch, right? We see that happen all the time with clubs in this league. But I think having a good mix of experienced NWSL players with players who are eager to sort of make that next step. I really like the addition of Simone Charley in that forward line, and then looking at somebody like a Jasmine Spencer, who is constantly been a role player for so many teams, right, throughout NWSL teams. But I'm also looking at their international signings as well. I think bringing in somebody like a June Endo into the mix, a Japanese international, is really huge. And then maybe I should refer to them as like domestic international signings, right? Because they've got a pair of former Tennessee players in the mix, right, with Vignola and also Katie Cousins, who played together in Tennessee, then went and played overseas together. And now making their return stateside and finally going to make their NWSL debuts after having a couple years of playing professionally overseas. So I like the vast mix of players that are here. You can look through every line almost for Angel City and find an experienced NWSL player. You can find an intriguing and an interesting international player,
Yes.
and so on and so forth. It's exciting.
It's so crucial for an expansion club to have those experienced players, to have international players that can bring experience from other leagues and other clubs into this expansion side. Because right now, Angel City is laying a foundation for the club for the rest of time to come, right? I mean, this is a club that's really looking to make its big mark on the NWSL. And it starts by bringing in experienced players, because you can't start a club with all rookies or with all new players into the league. But having that mix is going to be really, really important for head coach Freya Coombe and the future of this club in the NWSL.
When it comes to taking a look at this roster, I think maybe the expansion sides, right, are probably going to be the most difficult teams for us to sort of say this is who's going to be in the starting 11 come opening day. But are there any players out here that you're looking at in terms of this young prospect that has to make an impact quickly with this Angel City side?
For me, it's Mary Alice Vignola, who is MA. She goes by. This is a player that Angel City went after. She was the second official signing of a player after Christen Press for this Angel City squad. She went to Tennessee. She spent the last 2 years playing in Iceland overseas, and she's a defender. And in Iceland, yeah, she had 8 goals in 30 games as a defender. She ended up winning the league with her most recently with her team in Iceland. So she's a player that has a lot of pedigree at the international level and playing overseas. Now, as a defender coming in, it's going to be difficult for her to kind of crack into that starting lineup, but I think she can do it because she is a player that Freya Coombe had her eyes on and wanted to bring over. But it is her first year in the NWSL, so there's going to be a bit of a learning curve. Can she lean on center back partners like Sarah Gorden, Paige Nielsen, Ali Riley also on this squad that can teach her a lot heading into this 2022 season. So this is a player that Angel City made a lot of noise about, and I'm excited to watch and see how she makes her mark in this club and in the league for the very first time.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm very, very excited to sort of see a player like Vignola get in the mix. I mentioned Katie Cousins. I would probably maybe
Yeah.
group them together, right? As two players that we're excited to sort of see take their next step in their professional careers and doing it in NWSL. And then we talked a little bit about across how each line there's even experienced players on this roster. And I think in terms of a player that perhaps this club can lean on or look to in terms of leadership on and off the pitch, someone who'll be able to maybe impact a game when you need it the most. I'm still looking at that forward line. I'm looking at a combination of Christen Press and Jasmine Spencer. I think these are two forwards who have had outstanding careers when you look at them in their own respective senses. And I think when it comes to building something up, right? Being able to sort of be there at the beginning stages of something. Both of these players have a little bit of that experience, whether it was somebody like a Christen Press trying to have her role be what it was in Chicago, trying to be this go-to person, on the pitch for players around her who were much younger than her, already being young at that time, right? I think it was very, very huge. She was forced to be a leader very, very, very early on. And somebody like a Jasmine Spencer who has had the experience of having to go to a team and kind of having to start over, right? And kind of having to quickly find your way and find your place in a club and amongst its culture. I think these are two players that they'll absolutely be relied on for their experience moving forward. In terms of an international spotlight for this club, gosh, there's many, right? We talked about several already, and I know that in light of a World Cup qualifying year, we're likely going to see somebody like Christen Press get back in the mix with that national team with the 2023 World Cup right around the corner. And I'm sure others are going to be looking at her performances as well.
I think you have to look at that because Christen Press hasn't played in a really long time. So now that she has a club team that she has a lot of pride in Angel City and being in LA, she's definitely someone to watch that will break her way back into the United States international pool with head coach Vlatko Andonovski. I think you have to look at that. But yeah, there's a lot of international players on this squad. Vanessa Guilles, they just different players that can combine and do a lot of different things. But Ali Riley with New Zealand, just it's something to keep an eye on. Something to keep an eye on. I think that international level, they're going to be watching expansion clubs like Angel City to see what players can do, what kind of leadership they can provide at this club level for an expansion club, and then seeing how that could translate to the international level. But this is a big year for Angel City and for the two expansion clubs in the NWSL. I I don't know if they're going to be able to live up to all of the hype maybe
Yeah.
that's coming with it. Sandra, what are you thinking?
There's a lot of it, right? I think when you
Yeah,
kinda come in the way that Angel City came into the fold, you're placing a lot of expectation, yeah, on yourselves, but, quite frankly, on, supporters that you're asking to ride with you, right, throughout this journey, and that ultimately, I think, leads us to our biggest burning question for Angel City entering the 2022 season. Can they break this cycle? An expansion club has not come into NWSL and gone directly to the playoffs in their first year. Can they break that expansion team cycle? I don't know. What do we have for the projected finish? We said earlier at the top of this segment, Lisa, we did an attacking third power rankings episode
I
during the
know.
offseason before this club made any moves and any huge additions before they did their expansion draft. And we had them at seventh on the table of a 12 club standings. Is it changing for you at all?
I mean, there's a lot of pressure on Angel City, I think, to break into the playoffs. I don't know where they're going to finish. We've never
Yeah.
seen them play before. We don't know how it's going to work out. We don't know if what's going to happen with their kits, what's going to happen on the pitch, how they're going to play against opponents, the type of style. I mean, we have a little bit of an insight into what Freya Coombe wants to do because she was with Gotham, formerly Sky Blue, and we know how she liked to play there. But she also has a very, very different pool of players at Angel City. And when you have a player like Christen Press that you're looking to build your attack around, it changes how you're going at things. You don't have players that Freya Coombe had at Gotham, like Midge Purse, Ifeoma Onumonu, Carly Lloyd, even. So that changes what's going to happen. Can Angel City be the team, the expansion club to break that cycle of not making it into the playoffs? Honestly, yes, I could see that happening for a club like Angel City, just based on the pedigree of players that they've already established on their roster. However, I don't know. I mean, right? It's going to take some time to see what they kind of roll out with. Do you think they make the playoffs?
Listen, it's tough here.
Yeah.
It's tough here. And I say that as a compliment. It's tough out here in NWSL. It's something that this league prides itself on. Even we saw even in an expanded playoff format for the first time where there are now 6 teams that can make the NWSL postseason, that it took until the final week of games to settle out what the table was going to look like. I'm going to stay with that range that we stood in December because I want to come back here and be proven wrong. I want to talk about something magical, and I hope it happens because it would be a first. We love to talk about first here on
Yeah.
second, third, but for now, with everything in sight, I'm going to stay with a lower table finish for this team
I mean,
moving
it's
forward.
almost a win if they don't get 11th or 12th place, right?
You know what? Honestly, that is true. For a very long time, there was a similar narrative maybe around Houston Dash where it was like, well, we guess that their best season was their first season where they almost made the playoffs, question mark, right? This was back when it was just top 4 teams. And maybe that could be a similar energy. If they don't finish 11th or 12th, is that going to be viewed as a successful season? I guess it just depends on how people define success for themselves personally, but we'll be paying attention to it. We would love to see a shocking season from one of the expansion sides. Angel City, we're waiting for you. Thanks everybody for listening to our Angel City FC 2022 preview. We've got full team by team previews for all 12 clubs in the NWSL coming up, so please stay tuned. You can drop us your thoughts about Angel City on Twitter at Attacking Third, or you can do that in the comments. If you subscribe on YouTube, visit youtube.com/attacking third. But don't go anywhere. We have an exclusive interview with Angel City forward Jasmine Spencer right after this quick break.